This presentation will be recorded and there will be a poll at the end of this presentation, so please stick around for that. We encourage questions at any time. However, please remember this is a public forum and we are being broadcasted. So again, good morning to everybody. My name is Tatiana Calderon and I am the Autism Initiative Coordinator here at Synergia's Metropolitan Parent Center. Just a few words about Synergia's Autism Initiative. The Autism Initiative project is funded by a grant from the New York City Council under its Autism Initiative. This project supplements the work of Synergia's Metropolitan Parent Center by bringing increased awareness to New York City residents, particularly to communities with large Spanish-speaking populations, about the growing population of children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Its strong outreach components targets families and children with suspected or known diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, ASD, who are not receiving appropriate educational, health, or other related services. The initiative will link them to other services and supports that will meet the individual needs of children and families. So I want to thank you all for being here today. We're absolutely thrilled you can join us this morning. And before we get to it, just a little bit of information about our presenter. So today we have our very own Director of Training and Development, JC Cortez, joining us today for this presentation on transitioning to adulthood. Since completing his master's at Columbia University, JC advocates for children's rights, social and disability justice, improving New York City's public and special education, eradicating HIV/AIDS. His professional experience provided a front seat to educational policy, working with parents and families, to legislators in every neighborhood in New York City and across the United States. His experience in education policy extends well beyond New York City, including Brazil, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico. In spare time, JC literally runs marathons for charities for causes like HIV and AIDS, UNICEF, and Achilles International, where he continues to guide and help train athletes with disabilities. So JC, so glad you can be our presenter today, and I'm sure many parents have many questions. So we'll get started.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, and thank you for the invitation. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning to speak about transitioning to adulthood and the principles of inclusion. It's such an important topic, and we are going to try and ensure that you have a better understanding within the time frame that we have. If I encourage questions at any time, so please feel free to ask them at any time. I don't want you to forget something because you're waiting for a Q&A at the end, okay? Ask those questions because this is an important topic. And it begins well before someone turns 18, right? So we need to be thinking about the process, right? It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not a short race, right? So we want to think about it in those terms. So yes. So let's go ahead and get started. But we're going to talk about transitioning into adulthood. And if I can get some shared screen access, Tati, really quick.
Of course. 1 second.
There we go. Thank you. All right. So we're going to be talking today about principles of inclusion and transitioning to adulthood. My name is JC Cortez. I'm the Director of Training and Development here at the Metropolitan Parent Center at Synergia. It's a pleasure to be with you all. And yes, this workshop in and of itself is part of what we call the Apple Academy, and that is advocacy for parents providing leadership in education. It's an 8-course series that we typically do 1 per week, and we offer it throughout the year in both English and Spanish. And we talk about advocacy on much deeper levels than what we do typically for our workshops. However, there are 4 workshops of the Apple Academy that are also part of what we provide for the general public. And this is one of those. So if you're interested in learning more about advocacy and in advancing your skills, no matter how well seasoned you are or not, there's always something we can learn from each other, excuse me. And so I encourage you to join us for a future cohort of the Apple Academy. And yes, so we know who Synergia is in the Metropolitan Parent Center. We do trainings and advocacy skills, right? One-on-one bilingual special education assistance. We also have the Autism Initiative here in the organization that provides support and training to parents of children with autism, right? And we're one of the federally funded parent centers here in the city of New York that we work collaboratively with That would be also include NYC, the Advocates for Children of New York, as well as Long Island Advocacy Center. So for our agenda today, we have a lot to talk about. This is a huge topic. And so, even skimming all the things that I would love to talk to you about today, there's still a lot here. So please feel free to ask questions. It's a very broad subject, but I hope you leave with a better understanding, and feel free to always reach out with additional questions if you have them after this presentation. So today's agenda, we'll think about what should you be thinking about for future consideration. Also understanding what transition actually is, what the process and timelines and who's involved in that process, right? And when we're talking about transition today, we're talking about transition to adulthood. I know there's transition from early intervention to CPSE, which is preschool special education, and then from preschool special education to school-age special education. But then what happens when they turn 18 and they're, adults and they go out into the world, or what happens after they do turn 18? Also, we're going to talk today about keys to being an active parent participant. Also, where can you find all the transition related services and plans, right? Where are they in your child's IEP, right? The statement of needed transition services and what that's supposed to look like, understanding transition planning versus transition services. Also the student exit summary, exploring the opportunities beyond, right? Because transition isn't just turning 18 and having a birthday. It's, deciding if I'm going to live independently. Do I want to live independently? Can I live independently? Do I want to go to college? Do I want to go to technical school? Is there something that is better for me in what I desired? How does that shape my path to getting there? And then of course, independent living. If maybe I don't want to go to college, and maybe I don't want to go to vocational school. Maybe I just want to live on my own, or live in a group home, or have a roommate, and that's okay. But how do we support that, right? How do we understand what those options are? How do we explain those to our loved ones as well, right? What happens at age 18 besides a birthday, right? And then some tips and suggestions, and then a resource list that I've curated for you. It has a number of resources. It's not exhaustive by any means, so there are plenty of other resources, and I encourage you to look, but I will share more throughout this workshop. So when we're thinking about our child's future, we have to think about, what are your hopes and dreams for your child? What are their hopes and dreams for themselves, right? After they complete high school. High school may take 4 years, it may take a little longer. Also, how can you help your child prepare for employment if they want to work, or post-secondary education? Maybe that isn't college, or a 2-year college, or a vocational school. Maybe it's just getting a GED, or maybe it is learning another language, or learning just a specific skill set. And also independent living, right? Are they going to do this at home? Are they going to do this on their own? Is it going to be with a roommate? Is it going to have a supported staff? Or is it going to be something where you are a part of as well? How can you become a better advocate for your child during this process? Many times we as parents have, throughout the lives of our child, have been our child's best advocate, and we will probably always will be that in their lives. But there is a point where we have to also let them make decisions. And if that means the outcome isn't perfect, then we also have to let them learn from some of those decisions, right? We can't make every decision for them, and we don't want to encourage that either, unless the person, really can, right? And they have perhaps an intellectual disability, and need somebody to make those decisions for them. But how do we become a better advocate? Many times that means letting go of the reins, and we'll talk about that. Often it's just, walking someone through all the pros and cons, and that helps too. How do we help our child become a better advocate for themselves, right? What are you doing to teach them? How soon can you teach them? Honestly, you could start teaching them from as little kids, bringing them to their IEP meetings and just having them say hello and introduce themselves. Sometimes that's enough, and sometimes that's a lot to ask. So it just depends. But we'll talk about these things. And if not, they're just things to get your mind going, right? So transition, what does it entail? I put here the definition of transition according to the IDEA, which is the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA has been around for 45 plus years. It is the backbone of what is special education within the United States and across the territories. And this really guides everything, right, from the federal level. As we know, in a decentralized system like we have here in the US, where there's power also in state and local governments, those agencies there are charged with implementing and enforcing the policy. So the federal level will say what the policy is, and then the state level and local level actually take steps into enforcing it and making sure that it's actually happening. But according to IDEA, this is the federal guideline for transition. Services mean a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability. And that's designed to give us results. I'm going to paraphrase, so it's not so legalese. It's supposed to give us results that are focused on improving not only the academic and functional achievement of a child. Functional means like being able to go outside, to be able to put on your clothes, to shower, to brush your teeth. It's not only supposed to improve the academic and functional achievement of a child with a disability, but also facilitate their movement after high school, right? So what are they going to do afterwards? Whether that's an education, vocational education, if they're going to be employed. Many people with disabilities want to work. Why shouldn't they? It can't be discriminated against by federal law. And then some of them want to continue with their adult education or adult services, independent living, and community participation, right? The federal law also says that it's based on the individual's specific needs. This is not some one-size-fits-all approach to children with disabilities or students with disabilities. It has to take into account their strengths, their preferences, their interests, and that also includes instruction. It includes related services. Related services, you may recall, is like occupational therapy, physical therapy, community rehabilitation. It also is supposed to develop employment or post-school adult living objectives, right? How do they work? How do we teach them to be on time, to turn on their computer, to be a team player in a team employment environment. Also, if appropriate, maybe the acquisition of daily living skills and the provision of functional vocational evaluations, right? That's another way of saying that they're able to put on their clothes, to put on their socks, to get dressed, to get undressed, to take a shower, to brush their teeth, to do some of the things that many of us often take for granted, and that we know some of our children struggle with these things. So transition is to give us all of those things. And are there timelines and who's involved? There are always going to be timelines. So yes, in New York State, the law says that transition services are to be listed on a student's IEP no later than when the student is 15 years old or younger if appropriate. And after that, it must be updated annually. So from the age of 15 and up, transitions needs to be included on all a student's IEPs. It's a part of it, right? Hopefully it is a part of it well before that. And I'll move on to the next point. Here in New York City, if your child is a charter school student or a New York City public school student, New York City Public Schools is what we used to refer to as the DOE. They are doing some branding changes, but New York City Public Schools says that transition planning must begin when a child turns 12 and it is addressed until the student graduates or turns 21. And planning responsibility is charged with the school-based transition planning team, which is the same traditional members of the IEP team, right? Plus participating agencies. So we say participating agencies. Who are we talking about? Participating agencies are organizations that maybe are supplementing what the school can't provide, right? So maybe your child has a really great gift with art, visual art. They can draw really well. I can't, not one of my gifts, but maybe your child does. And so maybe that's something that they can't really provide in the school, but maybe you go to some art school here in the city, like Cooper, I forget the name of the full name, Cooper Hewitt, I think it is. And you're working with somebody there. That might be somebody that you would invite to the IEP team so that we can make sure that we still continue to address and support and foster the development of the artistic creativity of our youth, right? So that's somebody that we can invite. If the school says, you know what, your child really wants to be an amazing mechanic and there's this great person or a great agency or organization that we work with or know of, maybe we can bring them into this. That might also be an example of a participating agency you can bring, right? Also, if remember, there's a transition linkage coordinator, a TLC, at each school or district, and it ensures they are there to ensure that appropriate transition and transition planning is happening for all students that are eligible. And by eligibility, it's just an age requirement. Remember, here in New York City, that's 12 years old. In New York State, outside of New York City, that will be 15. So yes, if you move outside of New York State, it might be a little different variant from where you live. But yes, for New York City, it's 12, and for New York State, it's 15. So yes. Also, timelines, right? For here in New York City, at the age of 12 years old, how is that going to start to look like? How does it look like, right? We start with a level 1 vocational assessment. Vocational assessment is kind of just an assessment to see like what your interests are. Where do you see yourself working? And kind of like what skill sets do you think that might require? And that's done at the age of 12 years old, or students who turn 12 that summer. And after that, it's reviewed and updated every year at the IEP meeting. Now, what does that vocational assessment include? That includes a student interview, right? We need to understand their interests, their needs, their preferences, their skills, and their abilities. And somebody from the transition planning team, your IEP team, can do that in whatever is the best way we can get those answers, right? Whenever we do any type of assessment, we want to make sure that we do it in the student's best way of communicating, whatever that might look like. Maybe that's a verbal interview, right, where we speak to each other. Maybe it's a written interview, right? Maybe the student is better writing than they are speaking it. Or maybe they are maybe they minimally speak and they communicate through an assistive technology, right? Also picture icons to touch or point at, that's something that is also possible. And any other assessment tools based on the student's ability, right? We can't be completely inclusive here in the list, right? So whatever the student's best way. Also, there's a parent-guardian interview, and that's completed in the parent or guardian's preferred lesson, or it might be on at the school, it might be on the phone, it might be via Zoom, right? Or an online platform. There's also a teacher interview, right? Teacher will go through their records, their assessments and reports, and see, like the student's level of performance, right? That's also included in the IEP. But a teacher can also give us like an assessment of where the student is immediately in their development. So this is what a vocational assessment level 1 looks like. And this happens at 12 years old. Now, there is level 2 and there's a level 3, and not many people know about this, including some of my colleagues at the DOE. I've met many professionals who maybe haven't heard about it. If a level 1 doesn't give us satisfactory results, it really doesn't tell us anything about what we're trying to understand, right? We're trying to understand the student's interests, their needs, their preferences, skills, and abilities. If that's not if the level 1 isn't giving us enough information, there is a level 2, which is goes deeper, right? It asks more questions, right? And sometimes there are certain student types that just need more prompting, right? Oh, you know what? I didn't think about that in the way that you asked the question, and that's okay. For a student that minimally speaks or has difficulty expressing themselves, then that might require a level 3 vocational assessment, which is even deeper, right? It might take a little bit longer, but it will ask more questions so that we can get these answers. So remember, this is something that you need to understand so that you can ask, right? If you're not satisfied with what we're getting from a level 1, to ask the IEP team, or the transition team rather, to say, hey, can we do a level 2? Because that really didn't give us much, in my opinion. And that's how we would go from that. Excuse me. Also, at age 14, so at age 12, we're doing the vocational assessments, right? At age 14, the IEP team will discuss transition at the IEP meeting, and they'll review it every year thereafter. Students must be invited to the IEP team when transition services are being discussed. So up until this point, it's always been whether you want your child to come to the IEP meeting, and if it's appropriate. At the age of 14, they will begin to be invited to the IEP meeting, not to talk about their evaluations, not to talk about their placement, not to talk about those things necessarily, although why not? On the other hand, they will be there to talk about transition services, right? Hey, what are you thinking about doing next year? Have you thought about what you're going to be doing for the summer and how that might align with your plans after high school? Those are conversations that need to be had. And who best to, learn from than from the student, right? The student is also becoming an adult slowly but surely, and is also needing to self-advocate for themselves. By self-advocate, we simply mean speak up for themselves and tell us what it is they want in their own words, right? Many times as parents, we are, and being the primary advocate and the best advocate for our children, we always like, oh, we know what they want. And usually we're right. But you'd be surprised how many meetings you might find yourself, especially as your children are becoming teenagers, and you're like, oh, wait, that's not what you wanted. These are things that you can be doing on the side. But when it comes to working at the school, the student will be invited to the IEP meeting to discuss transition services and planning at the age of 14. At the age of 15, the IEP going into effect for that school year must include transition services. So it will be there from that point on. Now, as an active parent participant, there are things that you can be doing, right? And they can be, there's a huge benefit to having you on the transition team, just like there has been having you on the IEP team, right? You can help us talk about the specific skills that your children need, right? They can tell us what it is they want, and you can tell us, hey, I know this is what they said that they want. I know that this is going to require them to get to this, to acquire this skill or to learn something new. The best way that they might learn this is by doing it this way, with visuals, or like letting them be a tactile learner, which means they like to touch things and be hands-on. So that's where, you can provide insight into how best to teaching these skills that your children are going to need as they prepare for transition. Also, be active in collaborating on school curriculum. What your child likes and doesn't like. What probably will engage them and what won't. It's not to say that that's a rule of thumb and will always be the case, but you can also share that with the team and say, hey, I don't know I heard somebody say in the meeting that they think that would be a good idea. I don't know that it will, but you can try. But this has been my experience up until this point. And those conversations help us understand how to reach the child in terms of how we want to teach them something. A parent should share information with school personnel about the student and their family needs, their activities, their goals. You know, through the pandemic, we've been a lot. We've lost a lot of people along the way, a lot of loved ones, and that's changed family dynamics. It's changed who might be the breadwinner in the family or who needs to work in the family. It might change also like how we do things in our family, right? It might change our goals, right? Now we might find ourselves in a homeless shelter and we're, you know, or struggling and trying to get back on our feet. And how do we get back into affordable housing? So these are things, you know, that might impact a student, even though that's not their goal or their main worry, but it does impact them, right? And we want to be cognizant of that. We want to be mindful and think about maybe those extra needs and extra supports that we can provide a child, especially as they're preparing to transition into adulthood, right? Parents should also participate in selecting goals, the kinds of learning experiences that their children will have, and the kinds of skills that they will be taught. You know your child best. I will never tell you that you don't. And that is something that nobody can take away from you. And you understand like how they will respond to certain triggers, to certain actions, to certain words. So, you know, be sure to share that insight, because we want the child to be successful. We want our teachers to be successful as well. And, you know, kind of like we're preparing for a test, we want to be prepared for this as well. And how do we best teach this individual, right? If I know that somebody doesn't like a certain thing, I'm not going to do it that way necessarily, right? That's not going to be my first approach. So let's just keep that in mind as well. Also, parents need to work with other professionals and other parents to develop more appropriate options, right, when service gaps exist. This isn't putting the onus on you, but it's asking you to keep an open mind. You know, hey, this is what my child needs, and this is where we can't do, or we're limited kind of within the IEP. I'm not sure how to include this. And how do I do that? Is there another agency that I can work with, or is there some way I can include it in the IEP? You know, and that maybe that involves contacting a parent center like Synergia or Include NYC. And we realize like, hey, how do I get this added to my child's IEP? Thank you so much for your comment on Facebook, and warm welcome to all of you joining us there. I appreciate the comment on offering a workshop for transitioning to college and our children. Really, there's so many workshops that we can do, and I'll share some of those with you. Don't worry. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We appreciate that. So where do I find these transition related activities? Well, in short, you're going to find those on the IEP. Remember, the IEP is the Individualized Education Program, and it is that legally binding document between you, the parents, and the school district that tells everything about how we have specifically designed the education for your child, right? So yes, okay, it's in the IEP, but the IEP is 30 pages. It's 40 pages long. Where do I find it? Don't worry. These are the sections. I've listed them for you that you will easily find the transition-related activities. So they're included in the measurable post-secondary goals. There are areas of training, education, employment, and if appropriate, independent living skills. Also the annual goals that must be age-appropriate transition assessments, right? Annual goals that also document knowledge and skills that the student is expected to achieve that will gradually prepare them to meet those post-secondary goals. Post-secondary means after high school. Also, an IEP must include a statement of needed transition services after the age of 12, describing all the activities and strategies that will lead this individual to have the desired results after high school that they have related. So I went ahead and took an IEP, a blank form, and here we have it, right? This is the section. We see the measurable post-secondary goals right here. I'm not sure if you can see my pointer. And then still at the top quarter of the page, we see education training, we see employment, we see independent living skills when appropriate, right? Transition needs, we also see that. Also below that, on the bottom half of the page, we see the coordinated set of transition activities. And this is really great, and I'll tell you why. It tells us the instruction, the related services, the community experiences, all of those things. It tells us the service or activity, it's very specific. And it also tells us who's responsible, right? Remember, the IEP wants to add, it wants to build into it accountability so that at the end of the day, we know where to go. Oh, you know what? The activity for related services isn't being completed, and I see that is assigned to District 75. So I will reach out to District 75 when that is not happening, or reach out to District 75 or my IEP team at the same time and address it that way, right? Because that way we can resolve these things. Also, where else can I find transition-related activities? If you don't have a copy of your child's IEP, which you should, I would strongly encourage you to get one, a physical copy. But if you don't, or maybe you're a digital person instead, you can always go to your child's NYCSA account. That is the New York City Schools account. And that is an account that's available to all students in New York City that are public school students or charter school students. So this is the landing page of the NYCSA account. And this is what it looks like, right? So we see the name of your student. Student 1 would be here on the left, then student 2. If you have more than one student, it'll continue, all right? It'll be for you, and you can see your students' information, right? And we'll go on to this. You can see here at the bottom in the light green, we have information about the student. We also have access to forms, important forms that might be needed for your student. Parent University, which is a great initiative by the DOE, New York City Public Schools, that is supposed to give you courses and education and information on things that are happening within New York City Public Schools. There's also the option to report bullying too. But where else can you find here in the NYCSA account? You can find grades, you can find assessments, reading levels, a graduation tracker, right, that shows you all of the graduation requirements, student documents. It will be important for us, right? Attendance, transportation, what are the transportation requirements, student wellness, right? But we also see here the IEP. There's a little hand icon here. And that little hand icon, and go back to it. That little hand, we click on that and we can download the IEP right there. You can also see if your child has related services, you'll see the last 3 dates that the child received services and who provided that. Unfortunately, it doesn't go back much more than that, but it does give you the last 3. If you need something more extensive, you can always reach out to your provider or your child's school. So I mentioned the statement of needed transition services, and this is really important. The statement of needed transition services is something that we want to provide for a child always, right? And it tells us what is happening in terms of transition, right? In terms of instruction, where it's being provided, how it's being provided, related services, what that looks like. Something that we could consider for transition needs might be travel training. Travel training is commuting from home to school using public transportation. And we can orient a student, like, hey, these are the signs you look for in a subway station. These are the signs you look for on the street side for a bus, right? This is how you know you're going up or going down. And if you're lost, who to call and how to do that. If there's an emergency, how to do that. Travel training is amazing. And parents can learn it and parents can reinforce it. Students can participate. You are not limited to travel training just by provision of the DOE. You can also seek it through YI. They have an amazing travel training program at YI, and a train the trainer program that parents can learn from as well. But yes, community experiences, right? We want our children to enjoy and go out in the community and have fun and be a part of it, right? They're not Children are not, nobody, children included, especially, I guess, are not supposed to be just at home in a room. They're not a plant. They're not supposed to sit in a window and be pretty. So how can we provide them with those community experiences, right? Communities at schools, communities and consultants, private providers, other agencies. Here at Synergia, we're a multi-service agency, and we provide adult services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And that might look like community habilitation, right? Dehabilitation. Where can I go and be a part of a group of like-minded peers or individuals that are like me, and be a part of that and have fun, right? Life is not all work. It is recreation. In fact, if you saw our social media on Facebook this week, one of the Transition Tuesday tips was highlighting recreation as a part of an IDEA mandated part of your child's IEP. Recreation is a part of your child. And the law says that it should be, believe it or not. So check that out if you haven't seen it. It's facebook.com on Synergia NY. But yes, check that out. Recreation is important. Employment. How do we get those jobs, right? How do we teach the child to be on time? How to dress for work? How to interact with other individuals around them in a workplace setting, right? There are a lot of things that can be taught. So don't underestimate your youth, and don't underestimate what's out there and on terms of opportunities for careers. Daily living skills, right? Doing laundry, putting on your clothes, brushing your teeth. These are things that some individuals do struggle with as an adult. So we need to be sure that we're doing everything we can to teach them those things if they're still struggling with it when they're addressing transition planning and services. Functional vocational evaluation, we talked about this. Career interest, job interest. What skills do you have? What skills do you think you need? What skills would you like to have? Right. So yes, if the IEP team, including the student and the parent, agrees that services in one or more of the areas that I just talked about is not needed, the IEP has to specifically state why. It can't just be blank. There should be no blanks on an IEP. And if there's a blank, there needs to be a reason why. It's not just a NA, not applicable. It needs to have a reason why. Just like whenever you request a service or you want your child to be considered for a certain program and the district says no, there has to be a reason why. It's not just denied. It doesn't work that way. Also, if your child is already OPWDD eligible, OPWDD means the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. That can include cerebral palsy, that can include autism, that can include spina bifida, that can include Down syndrome. If your child has one of those disabilities, and that list is not exhaustive by any means, if they're eligible already as a child, then you can bring your OPWDD person, your contact person, and even your CCO, your coordinated care organization, case manager, to participate in these IEP meetings, right? The more continuity of care and services that we can provide an individual, the better, honestly. So transition planning, what is transition planning? Transition planning is assisting a student and their families to think of life after high school, right? And identifying those long-term goals, as a child, I want to be a truck driver, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a teacher, those things. And what are those goals? I want to have a house by the time I'm 30, or an apartment in New York City by the time I'm 50. These are things that we have to be considering, right? And how do we get there, right? So, all right, I have the goals. Now let me create the path. So how do we do that? The process includes many elements of planning for the future with the goal of investing in the child's well-being. So those vocational assessments, right, to measure their interests and abilities, also the information collected from the student and the parent and teacher, as well as school records, right? All of that information is going to help us. Now, that's what transition planning is. Now, what are transition services? Transition services versus transition planning, two different things. Planning is like identifying the goals and the path there. Services are how do we get there, right? How do we support this person in getting to where they want to be? So yes, the law says that transition services are a coordinated set of activities for a child, usually 14 and up, based on their needs, strengths, preferences, interests, and it includes all of the things that we've discussed already. In New York State, those 10 areas that should be considered for transition, this is what New York State Education Department says. That includes education. What are your educational goals? What are your legal and advocacy goals, right? Some of us can't live independently. So if we need additional legal supports and documents, what does that look like? Do I need guardianship? Personal independence, can I live on my own? Do I need to be in a residential setting with staff there 24/7, or just staff that checks in every other day or a certain level of frequencies? Recreation and leisure, as I said, recreation is important and the law recognizes that. Financial income, do I know how to manage my money? And if not, how do I teach those skills? Thank God we don't have to balance our checkbooks like we used to, but we still have to understand when we have money and enough money to buy certain things and don't. Also, when it comes to eligibility for certain services, right? How do I not lose my Medicaid benefits that have paid for my services all this time? How do I earn income without having to jeopardize my eligibility for SSDI, right? These are legitimate concerns and things that need to be given extra thought moving forward. It's not impossible, but we do have to figure out the best way there. Medical and health needs, right? Is my child going to be able to make those decisions for themselves? Do they need additional support? Do I need a health proxy? Do I need guardianship? Because once that child turns 18, they're no longer a child. They're your child forever, but they're an adult under the eyes of the law. And they might say, I don't want my parent in the same room when I'm with my doctor. And that has to be respected if that's their wish. So these are things that we have to start thinking about, right? Employment, how do I get a job, right? I want a job that I enjoy myself, that I find purpose, that I earn money, that I can go, out to eat on Friday night and take my partner on a date, right? It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just something for us to do. Transportation, what is transportation going to look like? Do I need to go through travel training? Is that good? Is that something that can be considered? Is that something that's not within our options and we need to look at Access-a-Ride? There are different ways and different things for different people. Post-secondary, college, right? Is college something that my individual wants? Many people with disabilities go on to college, 4 years, 2 years, vocational training. Some have talents that they can hone. So yeah, these are things that we need to consider as well. Also, other support needs. What haven't we thought of that we can include here? There's a student exit summary on every IEP, and this is what IDEA requires every school district to provide. And that's a summary of the student's academic achievements, their functional performance during their final year of high school, right? That last year is going to be so important because we need this exit summary. This exit summary is basically a blueprint for this individual's future needs, right? It's going to say, this is what JC did in his 4 years at high school. This is what JC was able to achieve. And when JC is moving forward in a job, JC will probably need this because this was really beneficial to them in high school. JC will probably need this set of activities or these supports in place. It might say what recommendations they might have, but of course, that doesn't mean that somebody has to adhere to that, right? We know that IDEA and IEPs stop when the individual, when an individual graduates from high school or ages out. So yes, So I want to say something really quick on aging out, and that is that aging out of high school typically happens at 21 years of age. Now there's been some confusion as to when the line stops, right? Is it when they turn 21? Or is it their last day that they are 21, right? The day before their 22nd birthday. The court system has just given us an answer on this recently. And the court says that Federal Appeals Court said that it is the last day that a student is 21 is when they age out. So they can receive services up until the last day they're 21 years old. So it's not before. So if you have a child that is 21 but not 22, they can still be getting services through an IEP. So yes, if they're in high school, right? If they've graduated, they can. That's different. So yes. It also must include the student's abilities, their skills, their needs, their limitations. I've already said this. What services and supports will be helpful in helping them have a successful transition after high school. But the goal is to help the student in establishing their eligibility for reasonable accommodations, right? Whether that's a workplace, whether that's a school setting, if they're moving on to another school, or what types of adult services would be appropriate. Right? It helps us understand that, right? So yes. Also, when we think about exploring opportunities, we want to think of exploring opportunities beyond, right? We've talked, a lot of times we've heard, especially us as children, oh, college is the way, a 4-year college, a diploma, and now in the news, we hear so much about student loan debt. Like, oh, maybe college isn't the way, and maybe there are different ways to getting there, and maybe there are, but we want to make sure that we're not thinking for our child and that we're giving them the opportunity to think of those opportunities that exist beyond high school, right? There is vocational education. That means training for a job, and it doesn't require a 4-year degree. It also includes the development of good work habits. Am I on time? Have I dressed appropriately for work? Also workplace skills. I should be 5 minutes early to a meeting usually, or specific job training. Like, this is how I put this together in this specific order, right? There's adult education, a program that provides services for those that are 16 years old that are not in high school or college. That can be a GED or a vocational program. It can be learning to speak English or another language. So yes. Question from Facebook. Thank you for your question. Can Access VR be included into transition planning, or are they a part of transition services? So that's a great question. Thank you so much. Access VR is support provided by New York State for people with disabilities, and it is to help them, support them in vocational training, and typically that might pay for tuition or for books. It doesn't pay for housing or living expenses like that, but Access VR is something that can be a part of both planning and services. So that's a great question. Thank you, from our question on Facebook. And yes, Access VR, if that's something, if your child identifies as wanting to go to vocational school and a vocational route, then Access VR would be something you definitely want to explore. And if they are going to be a part of it, or if you've already gone through the steps to become eligible, and including them in a part as being one of those other agencies, on the IEP team or the transition team, that's perfectly fine. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. We also want to think of independent living services and community participation, right? In life skills training, what to do in certain situations, right? Counseling, advocacy. How do I become a better advocate for myself as a self-advocate? Adults with disabilities also want to live and work in places in their communities independently sometimes. And, we should be able to support them in doing that, and making sure that they find that purpose and happiness. So what happens at age 18, right? At age 18, under IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, States are required to notify students as to what their rights will be when they turn 18. So if you're turning 18 and while you're in high school, the state is required to tell you what your responsibilities will be. You are now eligible to vote. You are now eligible to be convicted of a crime as an adult. You are responsible for certain aspects of your life that you haven't been in the past. And yes, the state is required to notify students of this. Notice I said notify students. It did not say notify parents. Make sure if you are in the situation that your student is getting notified. And you can always verify that through the IEP team or the school counselor typically. So yes, at age 18, a parent's rights will be transferred to the student and they will be liberated from parental control. That means if your child doesn't want to go to school, you are no longer on the hook for that. Your responsibility at that point goes to them. If they wish to stay in school, that is their decision. If they wish to attend a meeting, that is their decision. Their participation becomes their own at the age of 18. So yes. You will get a copy of this presentation. Thank you so much. Yes. Yes. Also, if you are the parent of a young man between the ages of 18 to 25, even if they have a disability, they are required to register for selective service in the selective service system. I want to first say, do not worry. The selective service is what we formerly know as the draft here in the United States. And the draft has not been used in decades. However, it is still a system that is in place, and all males, regardless of ability or disability, are required to register for the selective service in the system between the ages of 18 to 25. Now, like I said, it hasn't been used, but if for some reason it were to be used, they do not draft individuals with disabilities, but that has to be on a case-by-case basis. That is something that please take that into consideration. If you do not register for selective service, you might be ineligible for student loans. You might be ineligible for certain government benefits. So you do have to complete this, but I do want to underscore to all of you, this is not something that I would be particularly worried about. One, it hasn't been used, and two, the Army does not draft people with disabilities. So yes, but it still has to be completed because it is the system in place. There have been talks about getting rid of this for decades. Until it's gone officially, it's still there. So yes, so please make sure you register for your child when they turn 18. It is something that is required still by law in the United States. And for long-term decisions, this is a really big conversation we're about to have, but you need to be thinking about those long-term decisions, especially when we're thinking about the ability of your child to make decisions on their own. Are they able to make decisions on their own? If they are, then maybe you don't even need to consider this. But if they can't, or you suspect that they have challenges making decisions, then maybe you do need to think about this and try and explore this more with your child, for one, and also with professionals, right? Is guardianship appropriate? Typically guardianship takes away every right of an individual and gives them to the person that the guardianship has been granted to. I know a lot of people might think of Britney Spears, but this is a little bit more complicated. We're talking about a person's ability to make even the simplest decision. Guardianship takes away all of those rights of an individual and gives them to the person who they belong, who's the guardian. And sometimes that's appropriate. If our child has is severely disabled and has an intellectual disability and can't make those decisions, then guardianship is completely appropriate. However, there are those individuals who are able to make decisions. They are those individuals who can make better decisions if they have the support of a team, right? Maybe their counselor, maybe their pastor, maybe their parents, of course, I hope, and maybe a trusted friend or somebody that they've met along the way. Now in New York State, we have supported decision making, and supported decision making is an amazing process where we don't take away all the rights of an individual through guardianship, and we say, okay, this person is able to make decisions. They want to try and do this on their own with the support of a group of individuals called supporters. And those supporters will meet with the person and help them go through the pros and cons as a team collectively, and help that individual make their best decision. That is something that can also be explored and is a legal option available to you in New York State. It's not in every state, but it is a growing movement, thankfully, because we realize, to take away all their rights is maybe not necessarily appropriate for somebody who might have autism but doesn't have an intellectual disability. Why would I do that to that person? So yes, so these are things that we have to really start considering. And honestly, we need to have them well before the child is turning 18. We can start having these conversations with their pediatricians, with their school psychologists, with their private psychologists, other individuals who you like to depend on and count upon for advice. And you can always talk to an attorney. You can always contact a parent center if you need more information on guardianship or supported decision making. And then, of course, there are nonprofits that focus on that specifically. So think about these things, right? And have those conversations with your children. I've been talking so much about what the school does and everything that the school does, but let's not forget, as parents, our relationships with our children, right? We have the ability to see them every day almost, and to talk to them and engage with them in a meaningful way. There are ways we can talk to them about what they want to do with the rest of their lives. Start giving them the choices, presenting choices to them and letting them decide. We also have something that we call the dignity of risk, which is so important for anybody. We call it dignity of risk, but honestly, it's letting somebody make the best decision that they can. And if it doesn't turn out perfectly, they are going to learn from those mistakes too. It's not saying let somebody suffer, but there is value in letting somebody make those decisions and kind of understand and navigate the consequences, right? We never want to put anyone in danger. So obviously, maybe it's like, oh, maybe it's a food decision, right? Or maybe it's something, in terms of clothes. We start out like that. We don't say, hey, you're going to cross the street. That's not necessarily appropriate at all. So we have to think about those things, but we have to give them these choices, and we have to make sure that we're providing them these options, right? And the ability to make decisions. That way we can, as parents, we can start to say, oh, you know what? Hey, they can make these decisions on their own, and if they don't like it, they can also tell us what they didn't like about it, or what they wanted from it, what their expectations were, and how it didn't meet that. There are things like that that we can talk about with our children without even getting to the school, right? These can be conversations in the car. They can be conversations at home after dinner, over dinner, and it maybe not be as daunting as talking about sexual education, which is something we should also be teaching our young adults as well. But that's a different topic for a different day. Ms. Rodriguez, can you talk a little bit about the guardianship process? Yes. So in terms of guardianship, thank you for your question. In terms of guardianship does typically removes all rights from an individual, right? That's their ability to make decisions. You will be going to the doctor's office with them. You will make the decisions in terms of their medical care. You will make the decisions in terms of their finances. You will be responsible for their taxes whenever they are working, and making sure that those are getting paid. You will be responsible for all of that, or whoever's the designated guardian. Also, sometimes there's a guardian alternative, right? in case something should happen to you, this is the person who is guardian part, the next guardian. These are things that we can set up in terms of family planning, right? So we think about that. We think about, the medical, the legal, the financial, and then supports, right? So these are things that a guardian will be considering. And if these are decisions that your loved one can't make, then these are things that, like, oh, is guardianship something that I should consider? And then, of course, there is the supported decision-making. Now, there are other options that I'm not going to get into in this conversation. But like, if you don't need a guardianship or you don't need supported decision-making, but you need to have a health proxy, like so that you can make decisions on a health level. Like getting specific instruments is also a possibility, right? So that's something also to explore. I have a workshop that I can share with you guys that's really great on this, and it's called Future Planning. And I did it with my colleague, Paola Martinez Boone at the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. She's an amazing colleague. She's very resourceful, and she speaks a lot about what we should be considering in terms of these legal instruments, right? Whereas here at Synergia, we focus on the educational aspects. We also have to think about there's so much more outside of education, right, that we need to think about. So in the follow-up email, we'll be sure to include the English presentation and Spanish presentation on future planning so that you can have a better understanding of that. We'll also include a workshop that we did on guardianship with our colleagues at Cuddy Law, amazing special education legal firm across the country, but he also here in New York State that we work with, and it provides information on guardianship and also a presentation on supported decision-making with our colleagues at Supported Decision-Making New York, so that you can better explore these options. I mean, these are things that we could talk about for hours at a time. So considering we don't have hours today, I will leave that with you. But please feel free to follow up with me if after viewing any of those presentations you have questions. And if not, you can always contact our intake line and work with one of our special education specialists who can provide you with one-on-one assistance as well. So tips and suggestions. So let's start thinking about our child's transition and those after high school opportunities when they're in middle school, right? I mean, even younger. If you can think about it younger, it's never too early. Successful planning includes many things, right? Identifying those support services, involving adult service agencies, thinking outside, like, hey, who else can support my child? If my child has this gift, how do I find this for them? Maybe it's something that they don't have in the school. It's not in the school's wheelhouse. Schools provide so much already, but they can't be expected to have everything. And maybe that exists, in terms of talent, maybe something at Lincoln Center, or maybe something at the Met in terms of art, or, New York City Ballet, or Alvin Alley in terms of dancing. There are a number of places, and we live in arguably one of the best places in the world for talent in the entire world, not just the United States. There has to be something. So think about those things. It's never too early. And please remember, teach your child those self-advocacy skills. We have to let go of the reins at some point, and we have to trust them and trust that we've taught them everything that we can too. That doesn't mean don't support them, but we have to let them have those opportunities and have those opportunities to fail and respect the dignity of risk, right? So think about those things as well. I've curated a list of things for you and resources. Now, if you find yourself in New York City, you have, of course, you have Synergia, you have Advocates for Children of New York, you have Include NYC as well. The three of us serve the 5 boroughs. If you live in Queens, there's the Community Inclusion and Development Alliance, CEDA. There's also, what is it, United We Stand of New York, which serves Brooklyn. And then if you live outside of the city in those areas, There's the Long Island Advocacy Center, amazing colleagues, the Parent Network of Western New York for upstate, and Starbridge for the rest of New York state, so except for New York City and Long Island. So if you find yourself moving outside of the city, you don't worry. And if you find yourself moving outside of New York State, don't worry. There are parent centers in literally every state in the United States and the territories. So, you know, if it's just one, there's still but one, and these are free sources of information that's been vetted and provided by the federal government. They are supposed to be resources, points of information for all families supporting children with disabilities. So please check them out. In terms of resources, there's the New York City Department of Education's Family Guide to Transition Planning. There's also the Transition College and Access Center. Manhattan is probably the best developed one out of the 5 boroughs, but there is an access center in every borough. So check that out. The New York City Department of Education's After High School Guide. Also, New York State Department of Education, they have information on how to provide assistance in developing those services for vocational services. There is the mention of Access VR, adult career and continuing education services and vocational rehabilitation. I apologize to Anna, our interpreter, for these word soups. But that is Access VR is a New York State program that you should check out if your child wants to look at vocational education and continuing their education. Social Security Administration. You know, we talk about SSI, you know, Social Security Income, and SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. But do we understand what they are? How do we become eligible for them? How do we have a job and make sure that we don't lose those benefits? Please check that out. There are plenty of resources here in New York City and organizations that can provide you with more information on how to understand SSI versus SSDI. But these are so important. And I know I say this because many families depend on Medicaid and Medicaid waivers in order to afford all of the services that they have. So please check this out. Let's see. Is there a place or center that can evaluate a child for skills, abilities, talents, or interests? That's a good question. You know, in terms of skills, talents, abilities, and interests, I would really depend on the school for this. They would have the vocational assessments. I mean, you can always get those through counseling. You can get those through a psychologist as well. If you have a private psychologist, they would probably be the best people to do this. I know there are career counselors, but I'm not sure if there's in one center or a place. I will say that maybe another place you can consider is, what is it? Independent centers. So like we have Sydney, the Center for the Independently Disabled of New York, amazing organization that thinks of all of those things that we've discussed here that would be beneficial for somebody transitioning into adulthood. And that might be one of their services. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think it is, but they also are looking at expanding their services. So check in with them. Sydney is an amazing organization. In fact, I think they're on the list that I curated for you here. So yes, thank you for that question. Also, the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. The City of New York does so much for people with disabilities, so check that out. Here it is, Center for Independence of the Disabled here in New York, a great organization. OPWDD, understanding what Office of People with Developmental Disabilities is. The Office of Mental Health, right? What are the supports for adults with severe psychiatric disabilities? The Self Advocates of New York State, if your loved one wants to become more involved in the community, Self Advocates of New York State is an organization that we work with, where many self-advocates go to provide a voice and advance advocacy for people with disabilities here in New York State. They're in Albany, they're all over the state. They get together and they create legislative agendas, citywide agendas, movements. So this is something, if your child is definitely someone who wants to be more actively involved in what happens, this is a great place to start. Also, Project Shine. Project Shine is a project that we have been a part of the last 3 years. It's an amazing project. It supports understanding sexuality and sexual education, right? Especially for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We know that people with disabilities are often ignored when it comes to sexuality and sexual education. Even in a state as blue and progressive as New York, and a city as progressive as New York, we still don't have mandated sexual education in schools. And personally, I find that very disappointing and a disservice to students, because sexuality is so confusing and we need to help them understand that. And, but in the interim, please check out Project Shine, because it gives you tools and it is a toolkit for you to explore sexuality better. And lastly, for parents, there are plenty of parent groups on Facebook and social media where you can find information about many of these topics. I will say word of caution, and take this with a grain of salt. Please remember, when you're a part of a social media group, please verify the information that's being provided. Don't just accept it at face value. When somebody says something to somebody, things get lost along the way and details get lost. And so I just want to make sure that you get verifiable information that will serve you and your young one best, right? I don't want you to get lost in rabbit holes because of something you saw on the internet or in a Facebook group. So this is the time for questions. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer all of your questions. In fact, Tati shared with me prior to this your questions that you submitted, and I will try to go through those now in case I missed any. Ms. Rodriguez, will there be a workshop on understanding SSA and what they offer, the Social Security Administration, the differences between SSI, SSDI, etc.? We do not do workshops for that, but that is not to say that they do not exist. I would check first with the Social Security Administration and see if they offer any of those workshops. And then what I would do if they don't, I'm sure they do, but if that's not enough, I would go to the Center for Independently Disabled of New York, Sydney, and see what they offer, because I know they offer workshops on this topic as well. So thank you for that question. Yes, it's not for Synergia and my colleagues that include and advocates, it's not that it's not on our radar, it's just not necessarily, it's our wheelhouse. We focus on special education advocacy typically. So we might not be, we could speak to it at length, trust me, but we are not the experts in it either. So yes, so I definitely want you to get the best information out there. So yes, thank you for that. Let me see. What else do we have? Any other questions? Tati, how are we doing on time? And is there anything on Facebook that we can address?
We have about 15 more minutes left. So far on Facebook, no more questions at this time. So if you want to get into the pre-registration, unless anybody else has a question in the audience, please feel free.
Yes, please feel free to ask any questions. Make use of our time here together. Let me see. So I'm looking at the questions now. If you have a child who's trying to move on to college, I definitely want to say, when it comes to college, that's great. You want to think about the accessibility centers that many colleges now have. As I said earlier, once your child graduates from high school, they are no longer in IEP eligible, right? There will no longer be an IEP. And that means that, all of those services and programs that you were provided in high school will not necessarily be available in a college setting. Now, there are many college offices that have accessibility offices now. And you can check in with them. Well, your student, now that they're 18, will need to check in with them and say, hey, these are my needs. You know, I am 18, I have autism, and in terms of additional supports, I have needed this, and this is what has served me best in the past. You'll also take that student exit summary that I was referring to, that the Department of Education, or excuse me, New York City Public Schools completed, and they will share that with their college as well. And that way the college can say, oh, hey, this is what you did in high school. We can do this, we can do that. We don't provide, we don't provide physical therapy, we don't provide speech therapy, but we can definitely make some of these accommodations happen. So definitely contact have your child contact their college accessibility office. And maybe that's under a different name. It could be student services, it could be student access or student accessibility. But yes, check that out. That's a really good question. And I would also say, if you have somebody interested in going to college, or just exploring the options after high school and you want additional support, Include NYC, our colleagues at Include NYC have an amazing program called Project Possibility that I would definitely encourage you to check out. You can create career plans based on their personal interest. You can explore those post-high school trainings and education opportunities. You can apply for job training programs and colleges through their program. It's an amazing program. It's for children with disabilities between the ages of 16 to 26 and that live and attend school here in New York City. Let me put that in the chat for you in case. Oh, thank you, Tati. You're one step ahead of me. Yes, Project Possibility is amazing. And if your child is interested in going to work or looking at vocational skills, you're going to use that exit summary that the IEP team or the transition team created as well. And you will be able to submit that, your child will be able to submit that to their prospective employer once they get the job and say, like, these are the accommodations I need. I need to stand up instead of sitting down, or I need to take a break every 15 minutes instead of, every 3 hours or 4 hours or something like that. You get the idea. But yes, and that student exit summary will be really helpful. So yes, check that out. What else we have here in terms of questions? Transition, how to assist a youth in the transition of leaving high school. So I would always, this goes back to something that I was saying earlier, and interacting with our children. And we can have these conversations. Hey, how do you envision your future? What are the things that you would like to do? Where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? And think about those things and start having those conversations, this is what they actually want to do, or this is what they wanted to do last year. This is, have you thought about, if you want to work in the arts, have you thought about working in a museum, or do you want to be the one creating the art? What do you think your role might be? Yeah, those are things you want to think about. So yes, let's see, and have those conversations, right? Let's see. What happens if the transition arrives and the parents are not involved and they let their children? I'll skip that question.
We have a few in the chat, JC, if you want to address those.
Yeah. Here we go. Copies of presentations. Yes. Insight from a child not looking for a prodigy, but more in general, so we can address. Yes. Okay. Camille, Miss Seeley, if a child did not receive a transition meeting, what can you do? If you didn't receive a meeting, I would request one. I would send an email to the IEP team and request a meeting, or just express your concern. We have not addressed transition within my child's IEP meetings, and my child is now 12 years old. We have not completed the vocational assessment level 1. we need to, catch up and start doing this. What else can we do? If you get pushback, then I would request for a reconvene and have a meeting that way. But yes, also, and this is something that I've found myself saying a lot in a lot of trainings that I've been given lately, is that you do not need to wait for your annual IEP meeting. Do not wait. If there's something on your mind, share it. Send an email. It doesn't take that much, you don't have to put too much effort into it. Like, this is my concern. This is where we're going. I saw this on TV. Is this assistive technology available for my child? You don't have to wait for that end of the year meeting. If there's something on your mind, please speak up. Don't wait. But yes, if you haven't had that meeting, go ahead and ask for it. Ms. Morales, I would like to attend a workshop about guardianship. Can you recommend one? Also, can you provide information on the Apple Academy workshops about parent advocacy you mentioned before? Absolutely. So in terms of attending workshops, we at Synergia do workshops with Cuddy Law on guardianship, and it will be something that we are planning already for this fiscal year. So definitely something that we will put on our radars, and Tati and I can discuss this afterwards and see where it is in terms of the lineup. But yes, we definitely do that. We do an annual workshop on that. However, if you need something that is more readily available, we'll share the YouTube link to the last workshop we did on this, as well as supported decision-making in the follow-up email that's available on our YouTube page. So yes, you can attend that workshop. In terms of other organizations, I'm not sure who's doing workshops on it. I will always direct you to my colleagues at Include NYC or Advocates for Children first if we're not doing it. And then if they're not doing it, I would check out AHRC and maybe the ARC, the ARC. It's a nonprofit, and they focus a lot on guardianship. So yes, that's where I would go. In terms of Apple Academy, I am in the middle of our 7th cohort. This is the 3rd English cohort that we are doing, and we'll be done by the middle of August. The next cohort will be in Spanish, which will be offered in November. And that'll be the first week of November. If you do speak Spanish, you're always welcome to participate in that. Participation is mandatory, 100% participation. So if you miss class, that's not the end of the world. We do record the sessions for those participating. It is private, so it's not like your private information is going out anywhere. But we definitely want you to be able to, life happens, especially in the pandemic. Like I said, this is the 7th cohort. During the pandemic, people were getting sick. People are still getting sick. People have children. They have doctor's appointments. They have IEP meetings. We understand that life happens around us. So, we will definitely work with you if you wish that. The next English cohort will be offered late winter, probably I'm guessing like February. And that's when we'll offer the next English cohort. There are 4 workshops of the Apple Academy, which is half of the workshops of the Apple Academy that are available on the internet already. We'll share the YouTube playlist for that. But this is, like I said, this workshop, Transitioning to Adulthood, is one of them. Will also include special education, know your rights. It also includes understanding the IEP, and also cultivating parent leadership and engagement. So those are the 4 workshops that are open to the general public that we do year round because they're such important topics. So yes, so those 4 are already available. And we'll share that as well. So thank you for your questions. And Ms. Sugdeo, hi. Can you give me pros and cons on the certificate versus diploma after high school? This is a big question. First of all, you have to know what your child wants to do, right? Thank you for the reminder. You need to remember what your child's goals are, right? So if their goal is to go to college, to a 2-year college, or I believe a 2-year and a 4-year now, they both require a diploma, not a certificate of completion. So if that is something that your child wants in their future, then a diploma track is what you're going to want. In terms of pros and cons, that's very subjective. It depends on what you want out of it. If your child doesn't intend to go to college and maybe go the vocational route or some other aspect, then maybe a certificate of completion is more appropriate. I will say this, if your child is being alternatively assessed, and this is a really important comment, if your child's being alternatively assessed, typically means they have more severe disability or an intellectual disability, then please be sure you understand what the graduation criteria are for your child specifically. I've had many parents who don't understand that when their child is being alternatively assessed, they're not getting a diploma. And then they find out weeks before graduation that their child is not getting a diploma, and they're really upset, and rightfully so, because it's never been explained to them the way it should be, that when you're alternatively assessed, you will not get a diploma. So if you are on that alternative assessment, make sure you understand what the graduation requirements will be and what your diploma or certificate will enable your youth to do. That's really, really important. So thank you for your question. Last question, I think, from Facebook. Thank you, Facebookers. You guys are active today. Transitional meetings can happen around 12 years old or has to wait until he's 12. So transition meetings, transition will be starting to be discussed at 12 years old. That doesn't mean there's necessarily a meeting. So yes, once the child turns 14, there will be a meeting. And once the child is 15, it will always be a part of the IEP meetings. So yes, at 12 years old, you'll have the vocational assessment. So if you haven't had the vocational assessment, reach out to your IEP team and say, hey, we need to have this, because you do. So yes, I hope that clarifies. Any other questions? All right.
I think we're good, JC. All right, so that is the conclusion of our presentation today, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Before you go, we do have a poll to be activated, so just please stay for that. Once you've completed it, you're more than welcome to leave the room. Again, thank you so much, JC, for a presentation on such an important topic. Make sure to join us next week, Tuesday, for hybrid presentation on special education Know Your Rights. So you're more than welcome to join us via Zoom or here in our offices in East Harlem. Again, you can find the link to register on our calendar. And we hope to see you then.
Yes, I will be your presenter. So please come join me. Thank you so much, Ms. Morales. Yes, I hope it was. And please let us know your feedback as well.